Okay, guys, so now we jump to a conversation about consumer or corporate social responsibility. I do want to point out a couple of things on these slides. One, in the top left-hand corner, I like this slide. So companies with strong CSR see an increase in the following: loyalty, efficiency, public image, and employee morale. I think that's important to remember that one of the biggest benefits of corporate social responsibility is that it acts as an internal marketing mechanism, right? Employees tend to like companies that they think are trying in some ways to do good, right? That just makes sense. And since I said this, I might put something about this page on the exam, so pay close attention. Okay, and then the second one is what millennials care about. Millennials care about becoming active citizens, right? So they want to be involved in social issues. And that involvement can range from actually being an activist to just tweeting about it to just forwarding tweets about it. They want to make an impact. This has become so true of a lot of younger consumers. They want jobs where they can make an impact. You rarely do you see, or have I seen since I've been teaching, a young adult who says they want to go to a company and they don't mention something about doing good. Um, they like it when companies talk about their efforts. Again, it becomes this idea of a marketing concept. CSR can help you market both internally and externally. And then a lot of millennials want companies to involve the customer. So they want to be involved in the corporate social responsibility effort. So, for example, you could think of something like going to CVS and donating some money to XYZ. Some people like that. I know that others don't. On the other hand, you could do something like, saving box tops of cereal and using the money that you get from that from the manufacturer to go to, starving children somewhere. Millennials tend to like things like this. Again, I think both of these points are very important, and you may see them on one or more of them on one or both of them, I should say, on the exam. So, what is corporate social responsibility? According to the World Business Council for I just said council. According to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, CSR is the continuing commitment by businesses to behave ethically and contribute to economic development while improving the quality of life of the workforce and their families, as well as the local community and society at large. So, quite a mouthful, but ultimately, CSR means that companies are doing their best to help their employees' families, the local community, and society, right? According to the World Business Council. Throughout history, there have been CEOs and founders of companies who have pushed back on Milton Friedman's idea. They've come out and said, no, we should engage with societal goals. The goal of a business is to do more, is to be more, so on and so forth. So, for example, one of the co-founders of HP has a very great statement on how his goal and the goal of their company is to be bigger than the average business, to do better than the average business, to engage with society, so on and so forth. What's really interesting, though, is that a fairly large group of companies called the Business Roundtable have gotten together and come out with a statement saying, hey, we need to do more, and we are going to do more. And what they've specifically done is they've laid out a statement on the purpose of a corporation. I want to say before I talk about what this statement entails that the website is at the very bottom of this slide. You can look at the companies that make up the business roundtable. You'll see it's quite a few companies. But they essentially say there are 5 things that a business should be doing, right? So there's a lot of talk in here, but 5 things. One, you should deliver value to your customer, right? 2, you should invest in your employees. You should deal fairly and ethically with suppliers. You should support the community where you work, right? And we've seen companies do this. And you should generate long-term value for shareholders. Why is it that they've come out with this purpose of a corporation? Um, you will actually read a little bit about that in the article that you read. The article takes a somewhat cynical stance that companies are starting to feel more pressure than ever before. I'm interested in hearing your take on that. But I think there are a lot of reasons that companies would come out with statements like this. I think part of it might be kind of this cynical answer that companies are starting to feel more pressure, and pressure from a lot of different groups and a lot of different stakeholders. I want to introduce the term corporate citizenship. So, corporate citizenship describes a company's role and responsibility towards society. When you have good corporate citizens, they are companies that collectively accept responsibility with the government and other entities for their local community and the environment. And they must honor this this partnership, and the outcomes of this partnership, as an essential part of their core business. A lot of people aren't going to like this example, but one example that I can give is that when I worked for Altria, or Philip Morris, the tobacco company, they did a lot of things to make sure that tobacco farmers and people who worked on tobacco farms were supported. So they had learning modules, they had people out there giving support for the local community. They provided in money. I won't say income, but they provided money to the local community, you know, in an attempt to keep farmers and specifically farm workers on task. They did a lot of these type of things, and it's always interesting because one of the things that they do is, if you go on their website, they have an entire section devoted to what they do in places like North Carolina to help with farm workers and the local community. Um, Lastly, corporate citizenship includes creating positive changes in the community through the products and services provided and using the profits generated from doing business in the community towards community upliftment. I like that word, community upliftment. What I will say is that Altria was in a bit of a interesting situation, right? So one of the things that they did, going back to my previous example, is that they provided income and they provided services and they provided support. But what they didn't do is create products that create positive changes in the community. They are a tobacco manufacturer. Their products lead to some dangerous circumstances. And so some people would argue that despite the efforts Altria has made and the money that they've donated, for example, truth.org, and these kind of campaigns that are anti-smoking campaigns are typically funded by tobacco companies as part of their master settlement agreement. You can look that up, the MSA. But yeah, so you can think of other companies, though, that make an attempt to create a positive energy or positive environment around them and work toward community upliftment. I think one great example would be Wayne, right? Wayne touts itself as Detroit's business school, and as Detroit's university, being in the heart of Detroit. And Wayne talks a lot about how they believe that the university works hard to uplift the environment, and they can point to several things. For example, medical students who do things in the community, researchers who do things in the community, companies that partner with Wayne, so on and so forth. And so community upliftment is ideal. It is what I think a lot of companies who practice CSR for their local environment, yeah, who have CSR practices, I should say, that extend to their local communities. That is what they're trying to do, to see some form of community upliftment. So, Milton Friedman is a famous economist. You'll read about him a little bit in the article that you're reading for this week. Milton Friedman has a pretty simple philosophy that I think can be summed up in this one statement of his. There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in free and open communication. I'm sorry, free and open competition without deception or fraud. A few things to note here. Milton Freeman, Mr. Freeman, is pretty big on this idea that the number one thing a company is supposed to do is to be profitable, right? So on the right hand side, I show this graph of money going up. And that would fall in line with what Milton is saying that companies should do. Um, Second, I would argue that this philosophy, Milton Friedman's philosophy, sounds as though it falls under amoral management, right? We talked about moral models of management in the first few slides, maybe slides 4 and 5, maybe 4 to 6. I can't remember exactly, but his statement reads as though he's promoting amoral management, right? Not immoral management. He's not saying do things that are out of line with free and open competition. Don't do any kind of fraud or deception, right? So not immoral, but definitely amoral. And then I guess third, I guess I have three things to say. This doesn't seem to fall in line with what millennials have said that they wanted. So a few slides ago, I had you look at a little chart that suggests that millennials want companies to do better, right? To kind of care about society, to let them know that that the company is striving to do things that are in line with societal goals. And Milton Friedman is saying, forget all of that. Don't do any of that. Just focus on your goal and your responsibility as a business to make profit. So, the nature of CSR is that it should be a long term commitment, right? If you are trying to improve the quality of life for your employees, the community, society at large, so on and so forth, once you go down that road, you need to continue down that road, right? So, companies that make efforts towards CSR and then pull back, um, I'm going to assume don't have as much of a um, great reputation as other companies that um, go through a CSR and then push full throttle and continue to push. One thing that I will say though is that companies may pull back on CSR for a variety of reasons. Maybe they don't have money, yada, yada, yada. But if CSR is a marketing tool, which it is in a lot of cases, then touting that you have great CSR efforts and then abruptly shutting them down would be problematic. Remember that CSR, though, is not a single action, it's an approach to doing business. So if you're really interested, if a company is really interested in corporate social responsibility, then they should be doing things like putting out reports to be transparent about what they're doing. They should be doing things like being able to point to the community and the actions around them of what they're doing. When they're in strategies, when they're having their strategic discussions, they should be thinking about how their products and services or marketing efforts moving forward will impact the community, right? Um, and so a lot of companies, what they've started doing is, as I said, they put out these reports, which makes sense. A lot of, companies that trade stocks are starting to look at kind of more CSR type of things. And so it's just really important to remember that it's not a single action and that it's a long-term commitment, right? Ultimately, CSR acknowledges that a company can't act in isolation, which always reminds me of one of my favorite poems. John Donne. The poem is very short, but it is called No. I'm sorry. In the poem, he starts out and he says, "No man is an island forever unto himself." This is very true. I know that we all like to believe ourselves to be islands, right? That we do a lot of things on our own, which we do. I don't want to give us any. I don't want to kind of take away people's credit. We do work. I should say we work hard, but I'm not sure if we always do it on our own. would you be here where you are without public school, without a public school education, without public roads, without, these kind of things? Would I be here without, I don't typically, until I started my PhD, I didn't really have mentors, but I did have allies who provided instrumental mentorship in the moment, right? So I couldn't say, oh, I had a mentor from when I was in sixth grade to 12th grade, or I had a mentor in undergrad. I absolutely did not. But while I was there and I was doing things, there are specific people and specific instances where I was provided mentorship, right? Um, and I can't forget those as a part of helping me move forward to the career that I'm in right now. And I think that's true of all of us. It's hard to act in isolation as individuals. It's hard to act in isolation as a company, because again, you should be a part of the local community, and the local community and the world. A lot of people in the world expect you to be. So today we get this business roundtable with companies saying, hey, here's what business should do. But if we go back, I don't know, 70, 50 years ago, 70, let's say 70 years ago, there was a term, caveat emptor. So caveat emptor is the concept of let the buyer beware. So it was pervasive in business culture in the 19 prior to the 1960s, excuse me, and it essentially assumed that the buyer took all the risk. Once you bought the product was yours. So if you bought a bad product, that was on you, right? So you were responsible for checking the condition or the quality of the items you purchased. So you didn't see a lot of returning items. Now, I mean, I have friends who will literally buy clothes or items. They don't look at it at all. They just buy it. If they get home and it doesn't work, they keep it moving and return it, right? That just wasn't something that happened before the 1960s. And I would argue, and I think there's no real argument here, so argue is probably the wrong word. I would say that as consumers have gained rights, you see terms like caveat emptor going more to the wayside. Now businesses, one, because consumers have rights; two, because consumers have become advocates for themselves; three, because of the law, which we'll talk about in a minute; and four, because companies have realized how important it is to maintain loyal consumers. Caveat emptor is just not something that's done anymore.